No one knew just how much of a kingpin he grew to be in his illegal businesses. This kid scammed millions from Amazon returns just to flex on his campus. This mother-daughter duo was caught performing dangerous BBL surgeries from their home. Let's find out what other criminals we covered in 2024 who were born with crime in their bones in this marathon video. Who are some of the people who just love to do crime over and over? Let's find out. Starting with number 8. The Kingpin was arrested. Ronaldo Antoine Williamson rose to the peak of his career as a peddler of illegal substances in Alabama by being cautious. He didn't even visit his cartel connects in Mexico, even when they asked him to, because he was scared they would kidnap him, hurt him, or something else. But despite all his caution, Williamson's end was closer than he thought. One of his colleagues had joined forces with the police and was willing to inform. So, while Williamson was running from traps laid by the cartels across the border, he was walking right into one laid by the police. In the summer of 2019, Williamson had his home raided, and what they found wasn't surprising. He had a combined 285 grams of various forms of illegal substances, totaling roughly 75,000 doses he was planning on selling. The cachet of substances found at Williamson's house was so excessive and his involvement was so extensive that prosecutors got a rare kingpin designation for his prosecution. This meant that prosecutors could argue that Ronaldo ran a $1 million operation by himself, and taking him out of the market would be the equivalent of bringing down a kingpin. It also meant that if convicted, he faced an automatic life sentence in federal prison and without the possibility of parole. In most cases, such odds would turn the suspect into the biggest snitch ever. That's a lot of time to face down. But Ronaldo remained silent. Many of his associates were so scared that they didn't testify against him, and his case went to trial. At trial, the jury got to see pictures when Ronaldo held stacks of cash to his head and posed with expensive jewelry that he couldn't have owned through a regular business. They also learned that he owned a Dodge Charger Hellcat and a Cadillac Escalade. Ultimately, there was more than enough evidence to convince the jury, and Williamson was sentenced to life in prison plus 10 years for good measure. He was also ordered to pay $36 million in restitution as a penalty for moving all the illegal substances that were found in his home. We're sure he's going to work really hard to try and pay back that from prison. It was probably smart that everyone kept their mouths shut though, right? Otherwise, that life sentence would probably be over real quick. Number 7. Thief posed as a priest. Malin Rostas posed as a fake priest, Father Martin, and used that disguise to steal money from parishes around the country. Rostas' plan was simple. He would enter the church, speak to the presiding priest, and request to co-officiate Mass. He would strike up a conversation with the staff of the parish, and then claim he forgot something in the rectory. After he was given access, he would go through the rectory and steal all the money he could find. Rostas was first busted when he tried to steal from a parish in Los Angeles, but he was extradited to New York to face charges concerning a Bayside parish he had also stolen from. Of course, he had stolen from this parish using the same tactics. He walked in, told the in-house clergy that he wanted to officiate the Mass, and then stole $900 from the church coffers. Rostas was implicated in stealing an additional $2,300 from various other parishes before his final arrest. His criminal activity spanned multiple states, but he was ultimately apprehended in California. The arrest was facilitated by the identification of his vehicle, which matched the description associated with the thefts. At the time of his arrest, authorities discovered that he had an outstanding warrant for burglary in Pennsylvania, and he had previously pleaded guilty to a charge of receiving stolen property. Soon after his arrest, Rostas was extradited by New York cops to face justice for the multiple parishes he had stolen from. As of the release of this video, law enforcement is still investigating the extent of his crimes. We'd suggest that he start praying for forgiveness, but we're not sure how much that's going to help at this point. Number 6. Guy steals everything after claiming to be terminally ill. Christopher Lankop got in big trouble with the cops after he scammed his supposed lover out of $370,000. Lankop, who claimed to be a personal trainer, music artist, songwriter, life coach, baseball player, and mixed martial artist, also happened to be a prolific scammer, which isn't surprising at all since it sounds like he just started naming things things he wanted to do when he was 5. Well, minus the life coach. He probably added that when he realized everything else was harder than he thought it would be. Still, that's a lot of fake jobs though, right? Apparently, Landcop had been telling his partner at the time that he was suffering from a terminal illness and needed money to pay his medical bills. So the woman gave him the cash he needed and kept giving and giving until it added to more than $250,000. When Landcop was satisfied that he'd gotten everything he needed from her, he fled the house they shared and took her car, cash, and jewelry. Unsurprisingly, this wasn't Landcop's first offense as a fraudster. Just a year before this incident, he was ousted as a real slimy real estate agent. You see, Landcop was neither real, because he didn't even use his real name, nor was he an agent. He swindled multiple victims out of almost $40,000 by posing as an agent and renting units that weren't his to rent out to victims and collecting their deposits and rent. Our man has also been fingered in a lengthy probe concerning a family that he scammed out of more than $5,000 on 2 different occasions. He has since been arrested and has been charged with 7 counts of fraud related to the case where he scammed his partner and 14 counts of fraud related to the rental fraud. Number 5. This heartless woman stole from hospital patients. 56-year-old June Weatherman, who is, sadly, not a weatherman, stole repeatedly from hospital patients and didn't even show any remorse after she was caught. The crazy thing about Weatherman was that she committed her crimes without even being a hospital staff member. She would sneak into different hospitals, steal the cards and purses of bedridden women, and would use them to spend thousands of pounds on her personal needs. Weatherman clearly had a gift for this sort of crime too, because she was busted for committing the same crimes back in 2014. She had been arrested for stealing bank cards from elderly hospital patients and using their money for her personal expenses. She was sentenced to 7 years back then, but somehow got out early. But instead of using her newfound freedom to do something productive with her life, Weatherman decided to go right back to what took her to prison in the first place. But this time, she committed crimes all over the country and made good money from scamming older citizens in hospitals. She would lie and say that she was a nurse, then get access to the patients' rooms where she would swipe their purses and cards. Once, one of her victims ordered her to leave the room when she realized that her card had been stolen, while another discovered that her purse containing her cards and jewelry had also been stolen. A while later, one of the sons of her victims went through his mother's bank statements after she passed away and realized what had happened. Weatherman had scammed his mother too. Very soon, Weatherman was on the run from the police once again and was eventually caught and received a hefty 12 years in prison. Number 4. Las Vegas lady with 7 DUIs. Marian Reyes was arrested after she commented on a Facebook post by the police calling for her arrest. The post said that Reyes had cut off her ankle monitor and as such was nowhere to be found. However, Reyes definitely commented on the post and said she never cut off the monitor. Reyes said that the monitor was cut off by a police officer when she was arrested and that she was released without ever getting it put back on. The police then replied and asked her to turn herself in so that everything can be sorted out. And that's exactly what she ended up doing. So what got Reyes put in jail in the first place? Apparently, she had 7 DUI arrests over a span of 7 years, and her latest arrest led to the police giving her an ankle monitor, along with revoking her license. A judge also ordered that she spend 2 days in prison after she missed a court date. As part of her plea deal, her previous 3 DUI charges would be reduced to 1, and she would be allowed to enter a treatment program. However, if she gets arrested again, she'll have to spend time in jail. Reyes clearly has a problem with alcohol, so hopefully she gets help before she makes more bad decisions and tragedy strikes. After getting busted 7 times already, and who knows how many other times she drove drunk, it's just a matter of time before someone loses their life because of her. Number 3. Woman fakes disability. Patricia Rogers committed one of the crazier scams you've ever heard of when she swindled an insurance company out of over £500,000 for a civil claim after she said that a car collision left her crippled. As it turns out, Patricia wasn't crippled at all, and just 3 years later she appeared on TV, was running around without the aid of crutches. This is such a crazy scam because she might have gotten away with it all if she hadn't appeared on TV to participate in a show that required a lot of standing and walking. Since she didn't didn't use crutches, it was clear that something was up, and the insurance company set out to investigate. Back in 2014, Patricia made a claim for around £492,000 after she was involved in a car accident with one of the firm's policyholders. In her complaint, she said that the collision had caused a severe back problem, which meant that she was effectively crippled for life and wouldn't be able to walk without support. Then, in 2021, the insurance company revisited her claim and found multiple inconsistencies in the medical file she had submitted. Further investigations found that Patricia was walking unaided in her home and could even walk her dogs without needing a cane. Then they uncovered footage of Patricia running and jumping across the stage of a TV show, which showed that she had no problems with walking. It's crazy to think that she got away with this scam for nearly 10 years before she was caught. But then again, Patricia pretty much did get away with it, since she basically got a slap on the wrist. She was sentenced to 12 months in prison, but suspended for 18 months, which basically means she was put on probation and asked to pay just £500 in compensation. Wow, that judge really showed her, huh? Was she a family friend or something? Did she at least send her to bed without dessert? She didn't even get a timeout. Number 2, lady calls 911 for ambulance rides. Keisha Kennedy used to call 911 endless times with fake medical emergencies just so she could enjoy the thrill of several ambulance rides. This may seem like just a harmless prank, but Keisha's calls meant that the ambulance couldn't respond to other patients in real need. Sadly, her nonsense actually resulted in someone passing away because the ambulance was occupied with her and her fake call. According to the police, Keisha called 911 over 400 times, and sometimes called multiple times in the same day. She would complain of multiple discomforts and would be taken to the hospital to get examined. When she got there, the doctors would give her a clean bill of health, send her home, and she would start the whole dance again. Keisha was arrested and pleaded guilty to charges of disrupting public services, false alarms, both felonies, and another 25 misdemeanor counts of misuse of 911 systems. And you'd think that once she was in court, that would be the end of Keisha's antics. Well, you would be wrong. In court, Keisha faked being unconscious, which had to look ridiculous. And when she was finally conscious, she claimed she didn't understand the rights read to her because she was disabled. As of the release of this video, she hasn't been sentenced yet. Clearly, there's something wrong with Keisha's wiring if she's pulling this weird stuff actually in court, as if she's got Munchausen's or something. But since someone actually lost their life due to her fraud, she's lucky she didn't get charged for that too. Number 1, fake student athlete scammer. 22-year-old Xavier Dorsley thought he would make a thriving career out of being a fake student athlete, and he would have gotten away with it too if not for those pesky little things on campuses called cameras. Dorsley would approach students on campus at the University of Central Florida and tell them all about how he was a student athlete and needed help with rent and bills. He also often asked people to loan him the money, promising that he would pay it back the next day, but of course, he never did. The thing was, people often gave Dorsley money because they were sympathetic to his cause. They also had no idea that would be the last time they would be seeing their money and the fake student athlete. Unfortunately for Dorsley, his luck eventually ran out after multiple students reported similar incidents to the police, noticing that Dorsley's requests for money were suspicious. The police investigation revealed that Dorsley wasn't even a registered student at the University of Central Florida, let alone an athlete. His repeated approach and the pattern of his requests raised alarms, prompting the investigation that ultimately exposed his little scam. Dorsley was eventually tracked down through cameras and license plate readers and was taken into custody. It sounds like even though Dorsley wasn't a student at UCF, he ended up learning something there anyway, and it probably cost him just as much. Who are a few of the worst serial criminals around? Let's find out, starting with number 6, lottery win with an asterisk. John Ross Watson and Mark Goodrim, a couple career criminals from the UK, ended up in a weird situation when they won £4 million off of a scratch-off lottery ticket. The weirdness wasn't from the fact that they actually won. People allegedly win off those things all the time. It was that they bought it with a stolen card. Watson and Goodrim were on a crime spree in London when they used a stolen debit card to buy a scratch-off. They hit the jackpot, beating the odds of over 4 million to 1. The stolen card belonged to some guy named Joshua Adiman, who who wasn't even aware that his card had been stolen. The pair immediately celebrated their windfall before they got their winnings, with a 5-day binge, spending lavishly on champagne, cocktails, vodka, and fine dining. They flaunted their winnings, sharing videos online and bragging about their newfound fortune. Watson and Goodrum's luck eventually ran out when Camelot, the lottery operator in the UK, became suspicious of the duo as they tried to collect their prize money. Camelot takes fraud pretty seriously, so when there are jackpots being handed out, they have systems in place to verify the authenticity of winning claims to ensure that prizes are awarded correctly and fairly. The pair couldn't provide the details of the cardholder, claiming a friend named John had given them the card. Their story fell apart under scrutiny when it was revealed that the card was stolen from Addyman during a night out. Both Watson and Goodrum had extensive criminal records. Watson had 72 convictions for 133 offenses, while Goodrum had 22 convictions for 45 offenses. With that many convictions, it's like these guys flunked out of criminal school. Their attempt to claim the winnings was thwarted when they couldn't explain how they got the debit card. So Camelot refused to pay out the prize, which led to an investigation. Watson and Goodrum were ultimately charged with fraud, and both were sentenced to 18 months in prison after pleading guilty to multiple counts of fraud. Joshua Addyman was blindsided by the revelation that his card was used in the scam. Initially contacted by police, he was unaware of the lottery win until much later. And of course, he was super pissed at the lack of communication and wondered if he had any claim to the winnings, which apparently he didn't, since the purchase itself was invalid and there are understandably strict regulations governing lotto payouts. And that was like those guys' one chance to win the lotto too, right? Realistically, most of us aren't even going to hit a jackpot of that size, so yes, while it's possible for lightning to strike twice, we can all agree it's pretty unlikely. So these guys won it, and there was basically no way they were ever going to get it. They were all excited, and Camelot was like, Number 5. Banksy Love. Jake Lee and James Heppel, both from the UK, have been jailed for stealing over $7.5 million in crypto from 55 victims worldwide. The duo amassed a suitcase filled with £551,000 in cash and a Banksy artwork called Bomb Love through a sophisticated fraud scheme. Lee and Heppel spoofed the domain of a popular crypto exchange, blockchain.com, to gain access to their victims' login details and Bitcoin wallets, stealing large amounts of crypto. The Southwest Regional Organized Crime Unit, known as the SWROCU, which is a bit of a mouthful for an acronym, identified victims from 26 countries, including 11 from the UK. Authorities seized £835,000 in cash, including £551,000 found in a suitcase voluntarily handed over by Lee, along with roughly $80,000 worth of crypto, a $75,000 Banksy painting, and 3 cars. Lee and Heppel pleaded guilty to 3 counts of conspiracy to commit fraud. Lee received a 4-year prison sentence, while Heppel was sentenced to 15 months. The investigation began in 2018 when Lee was arrested on suspicion of money laundering. Police seized £24,000 in cash, digital devices, and 3 laminated Bitcoin wallet recovery seeds, which can be used to restore or steal Bitcoin funds. The SWROCU linked Lee to a crypto scam reported by a victim in Wiltshire who had around $14,000 worth of Bitcoin stolen. Detective Sergeant Matt Brain from SWROCU's Regional Cybercrime Unit said that the investigation revealed Lee as a central figure in the domain spoofing fraud. Their work involved mapping out the offender's connections to other suspects and crypto exchanges globally. The strength of the evidence led to both men pleading guilty, avoiding a lengthy trial. The court ordered Lee to pay nearly $1.2 million in compensation to the victims. Confiscation proceedings against Heppel are ongoing at the time of this video, ensuring that the criminals are held accountable and their victims compensated for their losses. We are pretty sure they bought a lot more interesting things with the crypto they stole that the police just don't know about. Number 4. The International Jewel Thief. A globe-trotting jewelry thief Yaorong Wan was arrested after a series of high-profile heists, including a daring theft in New York City. Wan, 49, was captured in Queens after allegedly stealing $300,000 worth of rings from Cartier and Tiffany stores in Manhattan. This arrest marked the end of Wan's long criminal career, which spanned continents from South Korea to Beverly Hills. Wan's first major heist occurred in 2018 when he stole a $330,000 diamond ring from Tiffany's in Seoul. Then he continued his spree, lifting a $48,000 diamond ring and a $10,000 watch from a Cartier store in Beverly Hills later that year. And then 3 months later, Wan struck again in New York, stealing a $255,000 diamond ring from another Tiffany's. Using a sleight of hand trick that your cool uncle probably used to trick you when you were a kid with, he swapped the real diamond with a fake cubic zirconia ring, fooling the shop assistant. 8 days later, Wan repeated his trick at a Cartier store in New York, pocketing a $25,000 diamond ring. He then traveled to Miami, where he stole a $16,000 watch from Cartier. Wan's crimes then extended to New Jersey, where he stole 2 watches worth $17,000 from Hermes at the American Dream Mall. He also swiped a watch from London Jewelers in Long Island, valued at $17,000. When arrested, Wan had several stolen watches and fake stones used in his swaps. He pleaded not guilty. Wan's presumed, now ex-girlfriend, who wished to remain anonymous, explained that he charmed his way into her life with the stolen jewelry. She met him in LA, where he used an alias. He moved into her home in Queens, never paying rent, but bringing home jewelry. She said she trashed the items after his arrest, shocked by his double life. As it turns out, Wan is also wanted in South Korea for a $332,000 jewelry theft. He faces charges across multiple states and has a red notice from Interpol, which is basically an international request for cooperation to local and provincially arrest a person pending extradition, surrender, or similar legal action. At the time of this video, Wan is being held on $500,000 bail or $1 million bond. And yeah, we're suspicious about Wan's ex-girlfriend too. She tossed out jewelry worth thousands of dollars on principle instead of returning them or hiding them. You know, she's off somewhere like, that jewelry? I tossed it, I swear. Number 3, police impersonations. 2 men from the UK, pretending to be police officers, were arrested for defrauding elderly victims out of more than $500,000. Mohammed Zaman Ahmed and Quasar Ahmed received sentences of 3 years and 8 months and 4 years, respectively, for their roles in courier fraud. They had pleaded guilty back in 2021. The 2 were part of a criminal gang operating from London, targeting elderly victims nationwide through over 7,500 robocalls. They posed as police, saying that they were investigating counterfeit currency allegedly passing through the victims' bank accounts. The victims were told to withdraw their money and hand it over to a courier sent by the police. The gang even used fake authenticity checks with members pretending to be senior police officers or bank officials. They even arranged for taxis to take victims to their banks. Aware of bank protocols for large withdrawals by elderly customers, the gang even coached victims on what to say to avoid suspicion. Their total haul was over $500,000. It's weird how people actually do this stuff, right? Someone would seriously have to have no heart to literally sit next to some trusting old lady and be comfortable with stealing from her. Kevin Hansford from the CPS, which is the UK's DA office, highlighted the convincing nature of the fraudsters, who gained the trust of hundreds of elderly people through lies. He emphasized that their sole purpose was self-enrichment at the expense of vulnerable individuals relying on their savings and pensions. This case is an important reminder that banks and police will never call to verify personal banking details or offer to pick up money or cards by courier. Number 2, extreme shoplifting. A brazen shoplifter from the UK stole nearly $17,000 worth of goods from Co-op and one-stop shops, which are like grocery stores and convenience stores in the US, targeting the same store multiple times in a single day. Reese Mansell struck 26 times in just 29 days, taking around $6,300 worth of items. He also hit one Co-op outlet 38 times, costing them $8,200 in stolen merchandise. Mansell's spree lasted 8 months before he was caught, caught, totaling 71 offenses. He stole a wide range of items, including alcohol, food, and household products, typically filling a bag before leaving unchallenged. None of the goods were recovered, as Mansell likely sold them to fund his substance habit. Mansell worked both alone or with a gang, mainly targeting co-op stores. Prosecutor Ned Sillett described how Mansell stole all sorts of items from alcohol and food to household products, sometimes with accomplices spreading out in the store. Between March of 2023 and January of 2024, Mansell committed 45 offenses across Co-op, Tesco Express, and One Stop stores, 20 of which involved his little playgroup. On one occasion, staff tried to grab the items from his bag, resulting in a brief struggle before he escaped. Mansell also burglarized an adult toy shop with an accomplice. He was arrested nearby with the stolen items, and Mansell said he was being blackmailed over a debt. During his trial, his defense attorney said he had a few prior convictions and had stayed out of trouble for 9 years, like the big boy he is. His crimes began after a breakup and losing contact with his stepchildren, leading to his life spiraling out of control. In total, Mansell admitted to 75 offenses across 53 cases, including one non-dwelling burglary, possessing a knife in public, and 2 counts of failing to surrender to custody. The attorney noted Mansell had been productive in custody, staying clean. He has a supportive family and a job waiting if he remains clean after the release. Mansell was finally sentenced to 3 years in prison and issued a restraining order from him, any co-op, and One Stop until 2028. However, compensation was deemed unrealistic, and so was Mansell's ability to stay out of trouble. Number 1. Flexing on campus. Matt Bergwall, a now former college student from Darien, Connecticut, wound up in the center of a massive fraud scheme. Living a lavish lifestyle in Miami, he ran a pretty sophisticated scam involving fraudulent Amazon returns that cost retailers millions of dollars. Bergwall's life was a blend of extravagance and deception. He drove a matte gray Tesla, wore designer brands such as Gucci and Rolex, and often flaunted his wealth on social media. His Instagram was filled with pictures from luxurious trips to Dubai and Tulum, posing in infinity pools and high-end hotels. To his friends at the University of Miami, Bergwall was a fintech prodigy, fintech being financial technology, with a knack for networking with venture capitalists. In December of 2021, Bergwall hacked into the accounts of employees at a multinational shipping company, later identified as UPS. Over the next few months, he and his co-conspirators manipulated the tracking system, making it appear as though high-end products had been returned when they actually hadn't. This allowed them to get refunds while keeping the stuff. The scam, known as FTID, fake tracking ID, involved nearly 10,000 fraudulent returns, which is a lot when you think about it, since it happened over roughly 4 months, resulting in $3.5 million in losses for retailers. Bergwall's operation was run primarily through Telegram, where he went by the pseudonym MXB. He bragged about his 8 full-time employees and the ability to scale his operations, like he's running a legit business and about to go on Shark Tank. Despite the challenges of managing demanding clients and maintaining his scheme, Bergwall continued to live the high life, attending classes, networking events, and parties. Bergwall's downfall began when federal investigators started tracking refunding fraud on platforms like Telegram. Bergwall's overconfidence and lack of operational security, in the sense that he basically had none, which is weird, made it way easier for law enforcement to piece together his activities. His fraudulent purchases included a $41,000 Rolex watch, a $600 electric blanket, a $350 smart TV, and $80 Reebok shoes. In November of 2023, Bergwall was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit computer and mail fraud. He pleaded not guilty, and his lawyer emphasized that Bergwall had no prior criminal history, so therefore he's innocent? We get why he said it, but it just always sounds weird, as if it's an excuse. Anyway, if convicted, he faces up to 45 years in prison. The court also aims to seize any assets acquired through the fraud. At the time of this video, the case is ongoing. It's so dumb that this kid decided to throw his future away for some fast cash. By all accounts, he was a really good financial tech guy, and he was going to a good university. So he had a lot going for him, and no real reason to scam other than greed. We guess there's just some people who, when they see an opportunity, can't help themselves. Who are a few people who are simply natural-born criminals? Let's find out, starting with number 5, Advantage Scammers. The UK's biggest ever government benefits fraudsters stole $68 million from British taxpayers. 5 Bulgarian fraudsters used a combination of fake and stolen identities to make 6,000 welfare claims over 4.5 years. 2 of the fraudsters, Galina Nikolova and Stoyan Stoyanov, shared pictures of themselves on a luxurious trip to Turkey. Nikolova's pictures showed them cuddling on a sofa in Istanbul, standing with bunches of roses that Stoyanov had given her. The couple also shared photos of their indulgent spa trip and a visit to Aston Hall, an elegant historic mansion, before going to watch an Aston Villa soccer match at the team stadium, Villa Park. Although they flaunted their elaborate trips and days out, Nikolova's social media made them look like a fairly normal couple. Other snaps of the group of con artists included a clip of one of them showering their apartment with hundreds of 20-pound notes, which is like, people really do that? The group operated out of 3 benefits factories and hid in plain sight. In places such as Antonia's Foods, a local grocery store that was operating as a front for the scammers. Nikolova posted pictures on social media of herself smiling and posing behind the counter at the store. While she smiled for the camera, the fraudsters were busy using the government welfare system like an ATM. They operated several businesses, claiming they were helping people obtain their national insurance numbers, essentially the UK's version of social security numbers, and claim benefits. From October of 2016 to May of 2021, the criminal group filed forged documents like fake leases, pay stubs, and fraudulent letters from landlords, employers, and doctors. The con artists would even boldly fight whenever the claims were rejected until they got the decisions overturned. Their actions put them on law enforcement's radar, and eventually, 4 of the 5 fraudsters were arrested. The 5th con artist fled to Bulgaria, but was eventually extradited back to the UK as well. Investigators searched the scammers' homes and found hundreds of forged and false documents. They also discovered stacks of cash stuffed in suitcases, plastic bags, and designer items like jackets, watches, and glasses. By the end of the search, officers had so much incriminating evidence that the 5 were forced to plead guilty. Number 4. Rags to riches to prison. A Chinese takeout worker, Jian Wen, helped the police uncover one of the world's largest Bitcoin hauls, worth over £1 billion. Wen's life changed forever after she responded to a job posting for a butler. After meeting at the 5-star Royal Garden Hotel in London, Yadi Zhang employed her as her live-in personal assistant. Within weeks, Wen, who had arrived in London with only a few $1,000s to her name, left her tiny studio apartment and took out a lease on a $6 million home, which cost her $50,000 up front and $22,000 a month. She paid thousands to send her son to a private school and dropped him off in her new E-Class Mercedes, and the lavish expenses were just beginning. Wen became a global jet setter, traveling to Zurich, Germany, Rome, Norway, China, Thailand, and Japan. During her travels, she pretended to be a part of a jewelry business and traded diamonds and antiques. While in Dubai, the single mother spent more than $500,000 on 2 apartments and set her sights on a $12 million 18th century Tuscan villa in Italy. But her luxurious lifestyle crumbled when she decided to drop millions of dollars on 2 London mansions. Wen attempted to buy 2 multi-million-dollar homes, one boasting a swimming pool and the other decked out with its own movie theater and home gym. But the spending spree triggered anti-money laundering checks, and officers discovered Wen was apparently sitting on millions of dollars of Bitcoin. At first, she struggled to explain where the Bitcoin came from, which prompted law enforcement to freeze the property purchases. Initially, she claimed the crypto was mined, but later changed her story to say that Zhang had given it to her as a love present, which you'd think meant she got a baby or something, but in this case, it apparently meant Bitcoin. That present led to the UK's biggest ever crypto seizure in 2021, during which the British government discovered a whopping $1.76 billion on a secure wallet in a safety deposit box. But as of March 2024, the crypto's value increased to $4.28 billion. Law enforcement arrested Wen, but she swore her innocence in court. She told jurors that Zhang had fooled her while she assisted the crypto queen with her jewelry business. According to Wen, the business had branches in China, Singapore, and Malaysia. She traveled to Europe with Zhang, where they used Bitcoin to buy high-end items like Swiss watches worth almost $90,000 each. Oddly, despite all their travels, Wen and Zhang never took a single single photo together. Perhaps Zhang knew that if she were in a picture with Wen, it would be easier to track her down. They had enough Bitcoin for Zhang to instruct Wen to buy the 2 London mansions, which were worth a combined $45 million. Wen said she had no idea that the Bitcoin came from the proceeds of an investment scam Yadi was running in China, but the jury thought differently, and she was convicted on money laundering charges. As of this video, she has yet to be sentenced. Zhang fled the UK, and as of March 2024, hasn't been seen. Number 3. No wives, period. After spending 4 years in prison for a botched hit job plot against his wife, Ira Bernstein was busted for trying to have his wife bumped off again. The New York podiatrist left prison in 2021 after serving time for plotting to hire a car salesman to snuff out his estranged wife, Susan Bernstein. Back in 2015, Bernstein and his girlfriend, Kelly Grebuluk, devised a plan to get rid of Susan by paying salesman Markenzie Louison to run her over and make it look like an accident. Apparently, always one looking for a bargain, Grebuluk took charge of the negotiations. Originally, Louison wanted $200,000 for the job, but she talked him down to $100,000. Grebuluk, a former mortician and aspiring model, bonded with Bernstein during his separation from Susan. She somehow thought she was doing what was best for his family by getting rid of her new partner's estranged wife, which it most certainly was not. Thankfully, instead of going ahead with the plan, Louison reported Grebuluk and Bernstein to the police, and the couple was arrested. Susan condemned Bernstein's actions in court on the first go-around, calling him evil for attempting to leave their special needs daughter without a mother. In 2017, when Bernstein received his first 5 to 15-year sentence, the 3 kids he shared with Susan were terrified of him and Grebuluk being released and called for tougher penalties to keep the pair behind bars for as long as possible. However, the duo were paroled within a few months of each other anyway. Then, a year after his release, Bernstein turned to his lawyer's sister, Jacqueline Goldberg, to help him try again. The plan was for Goldberg to destroy the evidence, but Bernstein was caught before he could follow through with his plan for a second time. In June of 2023, he was back in court and charged with multiple felonies for his attempts to solicit the passing of his wife. Goldberg, an employment attorney, was also charged with tampering with physical evidence, hindering the prosecution, and conspiracy. Looks like no matter how hard he tried, he was never going to be successful. Seems pretty dumb, considering he already served 4 years for basically the same crime. Number 2. Stolen identity. William Woods was sent to a mental hospital when he tried to claim his identity back after an ex-coworker stole it. Matthew David Kierans stole Woods' identity back in 1988 when the two worked together at a hot dog stand. Kierans' life changed dramatically when he assumed Woods' name. He took out loans, got married, and even built a successful IT career. Before he became William Woods, Matthew Kierans lived a tumultuous life. His parents adopted him in 1966, and when he was 16, he ran away from home, stole a car, and drove from San Francisco to Oregon, where he was arrested but failed to appear in court. Instead of going to court, he went to Albuquerque, New Mexico, its own type of prison, am I right? Where he met the real William Woods while working at a hot dog stand. Once Matthew had Woods' information, he got a fake Colorado ID in Woods' name, which he used to open a bank account and get a job at a fast food restaurant. His next move was to spend $600 on a car. Kierans wrote 2 $300 checks under Woods' name, and both bounced. But instead of returning the car, he just stole it and drove the thing to Idaho. He abandoned it when it broke down and withdrew all the money from the Colorado bank account he opened in Woods' name. And Kierans' web of lies was just beginning. It gets crazy. By 1994, Kierans had a wife and child, both of whom he gave the last name Woods. Next, he moved to Colorado and used a copy of Woods' birth certificate to get information about his relatives on Ancestry.com, like he's Tom Ripley or something. While posing as William Woods, Kierans' career took off. He took a job as a systems architect at the University of Iowa Hospital. For the next 10 years, he made over $700,000 and was earning $140,501 by 2023. Although Kierans was living a pretty good life using Woods' name, the real William Woods was homeless in Los Angeles. Woods went to a bank branch in 2019 and discovered that someone had used his bank accounts and information to accumulate a lot of debt. He tried to close the accounts and gave the bank his social security number and ID. Couldn't answer any of the security questions Kierans had set up for the account. The bank called their contact number for Woods, and Kierans picked up. The con artist answered the questions and told the employees that he hadn't given anyone in California permission to access his accounts. So one of the bank employees called law enforcement, who questioned Woods and Kieran's. The police arrested the real Woods and charged him with identity theft and false impersonation. They further concluded that he wasn't mentally competent to stand trial, so they sent him to a mental hospital. Here's the thing though, he was mentally just fine. Eventually, a judge gave Woods 2 years in county jail, but gave him credit for the 2 years he spent in the hospital. One of the terms of his release was that he stopped claiming to be William Woods, but Woods refused to give up. Woods eventually tracked down Kieran's and contacted his employer's security department. The University of Iowa Hospital sent his complaint to the police department, which opened an investigation. Detective Ian Mafound ordered DNA tests, which confirmed that Woods was telling the truth and that Kieran's was a scammer. Over 30 years after he first used Woods' name, Kieran's confessed to prolonged identity theft and entered police custody in July of 2023. A federal court indicted him on multiple counts of identity theft and false statements to a National Credit Union administration. As of May of 2024, Kieran's is in custody of the U.S. Marshals and is facing up to 32 years imprisonment. What a nightmare to have someone steal your name and now suddenly you're homeless and told you're insane. Thing is, Kieran's made a pretty good life for himself off of his own merits, so this all seemed pretty pointless, which makes the whole thing strange. Number 1. BBLs gone wild. A Texas mother-daughter duo administered illegal and dangerous butt Botox injections, something Botox isn't used for. Across the U.S., Consuelo Dalbo and her daughter, Isabella, charged customers $6,000 for the butt-boosting procedure. Law enforcement suspected the pair's illegal operation and sent an undercover officer to pose as a client. The officer met the women at a temporary residence in Texas, as you'd expect with shady medical operations. Well, at least it wasn't in some back alley or in a bus or something. Seriously, people will get this stuff done pretty much anywhere, won't they? Anyway, Consuelo and Isabella said they had come straight from the airport after traveling to California for work. Before they began the procedure, the mother-daughter duo gave the officer some meds to relax right before they got down to their illegal procedure, which was enough evidence for the officer to make an arrest. The FDA, Homeland Security Investigations, and the Houston Department's Major Offenders Division joined forces to bring down Consuelo and Isabella. Cameras caught the women leaving their home in handcuffs while police swarmed the property. Law enforcement removed bottles of illegal injectables and medical equipment from the premises. The women claimed they didn't even know what was in the bottles as they were being brought out. Psh, yeah, right. They totally knew what was in those bottles. Consuelo and Isabella were released on bond after being charged, and this mother-daughter team are far from the only people illegally performing these dangerous procedures. Substances like injectable silicone used for body contouring come with many risks. The problem is that the injectable silicone breaks into small particles and travels throughout the body, causing potentially life-threatening complications such as an embolism or stroke. Who are the criminals who were born with crime in their bones? Let's find out. Starting with number 5, the talented Mr. Chipola. Joey Chipola is seemingly a real-life talented Mr. Ripley. He was living large, but not by honest means. He conned people out of cash left and right, totaling $1.1 million, including dipping his fingers into COVID relief funds. His house? A massive mansion in Bloomingdale, Illinois, complete with exotic cars like a Lamborghini and Bentley that he had just chilling in the driveway. The guy even flew his own Cessna plane and spent tons at casinos like it was no big deal. But Joey wasn't some high-flying businessman. He was a full-on scam artist. Chipola once gave a guy a fake $35,000 check for a Corvette, and he formed all sorts of shady companies, like one that parked planes at an airport outside Chicago. But Joey wasn't parking planes like it was some valet gig. He had set up this shady company called 6 North Aviation and stashed planes in hangars at the DuPage County Airport. But he wasn't just storing planes. He was renting them out without providing pilots or cruise. He even set up a fake company to sell stolen airplane gear. Then there was his car business on eBay that was a total sham. He'd roll back mileage on cars or straight up take people's cash for vehicles he didn't even have. So he wasn't too far off from a normal used car salesman, right? But Joey wasn't just about the cars and the planes. He got in on that pandemic relief action, snagging over $1 million to fund his fancy lifestyle. Louis Vuitton sprees, jewelry shopping sprees, you name it, he blew cash on it. But his fun wasn't going to last forever. In 2017, there was a sketchy incident at Joey Chipola's apartment and a guy named Jeffrey Charles Fox. Fox tragically fell 39 stories from the balcony and ended up with the results you'd expect. But here's where things get questionable. Apparently, 2 years before the accident, Fox had been accused of hitting a woman. The woman later ended up being Joey's wife. So of course, there were plenty of suspicions about what exactly happened that day. However, no charges were brought against Joey in relation to this incident, and the medical examiner ruled it as an accident. The authorities eventually caught up with Joey after a string of dodgy moves, such as trying to flee to his roof once when agents raided his place. The guy even tried to bolt once before during a traffic stop, claiming he thought feds were tailing him. Spoiler alert, they weren't. Due to Joey's repeated attempts to evade law enforcement, authorities were hesitant to grant him bail after he was arrested for tax evasion and other financial crimes. These actions raised concerns about his potential flight risk, coupled with the seriousness of the charges against him. Facing the potential 10 years, Joey's lawyer argued for a lighter sentence, claiming he's totally turned a new leaf while in jail. Weird how that happens during a trial, right? But with a history of 15 convictions across 4 states, mostly for bouncing checks for big purchases, his forecast isn't exactly sunny. Joey has left a trail of victims who bonded over their shared nightmares, forming a community with a dedicated Facebook group named Conned by Joey Chipola. That's definitely an achievement unlocked. Number 4. Tipping herself. As originally reported by ABC 11, Erica Denton, a bartender from Cary, North Carolina, found herself in hot water after pulling off a sneaky scam. Over a 6-month period, she was cooking up trouble at Tasu Asian Bistro, altering receipts to score some extra cash. Instead of serving up honesty with her drinks, Denton was swapping the food amounts with the tip totals, raking in bigger tips for herself. This wasn't just a one-time deal either. She reportedly did this trick multiple times, scoring a grand total of $10,000 in ill-gotten gains. The restaurant management finally caught wind of her scheme and let her know that she didn't have to go home, but she couldn't stay there, because she was fired. Now, what's a scam without consequences? Denton got slapped with a charge of falsely obtaining property by false pretense, which is just a fancy way of saying she got caught red-handed. She posted bail, but her days of slinging drinks were over. The management at Tasu, understandably ticked off by Denton's shenanigans, tightened up their ship real quick. They're now double-checking every receipt and plan to start running background checks on future hires. Can't blame them for wanting to avoid another round of trouble. As for Denton, when reporters went knocking on her door, her family claimed she was MIA. Looks like she might be laying low for a while, nursing a cocktail of regret and hoping her 15 minutes of infamy blow over. Number 3. Priceless art for sale. 2 smooth operators, Bharat Kazemi and Raj Nasta, hailing from the UK, pulled off a long con that would make even the slickest scammers blush. They were apparently peddling phony Dali and Picasso paintings to unsuspecting marks, mostly targeting the elderly and vulnerable. Their hustle started with a cold call, posing as a fancy asset management firm, convincing folks to invest their hard-earned cash in art. Victims coughed up anywhere from $2,500 to $3,800 for supposed Salvador Dali masterpieces, then got roped into dropping as much as $26,000 on supposed Pablo Picasso originals. But surprise, surprise, when the artworks arrived, they were about as real as a $3 bill. After realizing they had been tricked, the victims had no way to reach the con men, leaving them with overpriced reprints. Art experts confirmed that the works were fake, worth no more than $400 a pop. Over 125 people got reeled in over a 2-year stretch, some losing their life savings, others getting fleeced for over $200,000. So the cops launched a 6-year manhunt, which started back in April of 2018. A breadcrumb trail led them straight to Kazemi's house. Armed with a warrant, they swooped in, slapped the cuffs on him, also suspecting him of laundering dirty money. Digging into Kazemi's business dealings and bank accounts revealed he had raked in a cool $3.4 million. The money was being sent overseas faster than you could say fraud, with Kazemi and his partner in crime Nasta funneling funds like there was no tomorrow. When the police finally got their hands on their phones, it was like striking gold for the investigators. These digital vaults were a trove of evidence, revealing communication that intricately linked them to an international organized crime syndicate. It was the irrefutable evidence that sealed their fate. After their days in court, Kazemi was slapped with 4 years and 9 months, while Nasta got a 3-year sentence. So far, none of the victims were able to recover their money, but there's a proceeds of crime hearing in the works to claw back some of the cash. Number 2. The Great Escape Attempts. Stephen Morgan Byers, a seasoned con man with a record stretching back 4 decades, thought he could outsmart the cops in New Mexico. As it turns out, he couldn't. Officers grabbed Byers, age 61, on a laundry list of warrants, nearly a year after he ditched his parole, catching up with him at a hospital for what seems to be a legitimate medical problem. Body cam footage captured the hilarious/horrifying moment when Byers, apparently chock full of cunning, convinced the officers to let him go for a number 2. Next thing you know, medics are shouting about someone climbing through the ceiling. Panicked officers stormed the bathroom, only to find Byers had pulled a Houdini, leaving behind a pile of insulation. After a game of hide and seek worthy of a preschool playground, they finally caught him nestled in a wall cavity, looking as comfortable as a cat in a cardboard box, claiming he thought he was having a heart attack. Byers, wanting to hit some Gene Parmesan levels of cunning, decided to give it another go. He once again complained of stomach troubles to get the officer to take off his cuffs to let him use the restroom. They felt he couldn't clean himself properly in cuffs, so they were being nice. 45 minutes later, everyone hears scratching from the ceiling again. So the cops burst into the bathroom, only to find another ceiling panel on the floor and insulation everywhere. Apparently Byers was trapped up there like some raccoon, so police found him and made him climb back out of the hole he made. He eventually asked to use the bathroom again and was roundly told no. Byers had been busy pulling off home improvement scams, leaving people such as Laura Tacker out of pocket to the tune $50,000. Target 7, an investigative news team, played a crucial role in bringing Byers to justice. They interviewed Laura Tacker and 2 other women who fell victim to Byers' home improvement fraud, amplifying their voices and alerting the public to Byers' schemes. Thanks to their reporting, authorities were spurred into action, ultimately leading to Byers' arrest. At the time of this video, Byers is cooling his heels in the Metropolitan Detention Center, awaiting his day in court. Meanwhile, the hospital is left with a $20,000 bill to patch up the mess he made. Once he's sent to prison, someone better let the warden know that if Byers asks for a large poster of Raquel Welch, everyone needs to be on high alert. Number 1. The Brazilian Bitcoin Pharaoh. Gleidson Achacho dos Santos, dubbed the Bitcoin Pharaoh, didn't just dip his toes in the crypto pool, he cannonballed right into it. But his dive wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. It was more like bullets and betrayal. In Rio de Janeiro, a luxury car was idling at a traffic light, and bam, shots pierced the air. That was the day Nilson Alves da Silva narrowly escaped because he was accused of encroaching on Dos Santos' crypto kingdom. Da Silva dodged the worst, but the message was loud and clear. Don't mess with the Bitcoin Pharaoh. Dos Santos wasn't just a big fish in the crypto pond. He was more like a shark, making waves with billions in transactions through his company, GAS Consulting and Technology. With promises of hefty returns, Dos Santos wasn't just making bank, he was filling them. Picture this: flashy jewelry, posh apartments, and sports cars that'd make a millionaire blush. But behind the glitz and glam, Dos Santos allegedly ran a Ponzi scheme, promising returns he couldn't deliver. And when rivals like Wesley Pisano started nipping at his heels, Dos Santos allegedly didn't play nice. Pisano ended up taking a forever nap in his Porsche, with Dos Santos allegedly pulling the strings that put him to sleep. Law enforcement finally caught up with Dos Santos when they raided his mansion, finding millions in cash, Bitcoin, 21 high-end vehicles, expensive watches, and even gold bars. Meanwhile, his wife, Mirlis Jocelyn Diaz-Zerpa, had vanished, allegedly with a jaw-dropping $185 million in Bitcoin. So how was he caught? First off, Dos Santos wasn't exactly subtle about his newfound wealth. He flaunted his riches with flashy purchases from expensive jewelry to swanky apartments, drawing attention to himself like a flashing neon sign. But it wasn't just his lavish lifestyle that raised eyebrows. It was also the sheer scale of his operation. With billions in transactions flowing through his company, GAS Consulting and Technology, Dos Santos was making waves in the crypto world. Such astronomical figures couldn't escape the notice of financial authorities, who began sniffing around for signs of foul play. Then, there were the whispers of wrongdoing swirling around Dos Santos. The accusations of running a Ponzi scheme and ordering hits on his competitors didn't exactly paint him as a model citizen. As word spread of his alleged misdeeds, it wasn't long before law enforcement took notice. The final straw came when Dos Santos allegedly crossed the line, ordering a hit on Wesley Pisano, one of his rivals. With the heat turning up, Dos Santos' days were numbered. But it was an anonymous tip that finally sealed his fate. When federal police received word that Dos Santos was planning to flee Brazil, they sprang into action, raiding his home and seizing millions in cash, Bitcoin, and other assets. Despite mounting evidence against Gleison Achachio Dos Santos, early investors in GAS insisted Dos Santos was innocent, a belief fueled by regular payouts and a strange amount of loyalty. This loyalty manifested in public displays of support, with crowds protesting outside major media outlets and federal courthouses demanding Dos Santos' release. Jefferson Brandow, a vocal advocate for Dos Santos, portrayed GAS as an alternative to traditional banking, offering investors a tangible share of profits rather than mere crumbs. Even from behind bars, Dos Santos maintained his innocence, blaming authorities for freezing GAS assets and obstructing payouts to investors. Yet, as Brazilian law enforcement delved deeper into the scope of Dos Santos' empire, they uncovered a staggering number of victims spanning multiple countries, displaying the widespread impact of his scheme. A federal court in Rio de Janeiro ultimately ruled that Dos Santos must return $3.7 billion to investors who fell victim to his Ponzi scheme. Following his arrest and subsequent legal proceedings, Dos Santos has been ordered to comply with the court's decision within 72 hours. However, paying out that amount of money in that amount of time is very unlikely. As of this video, the case is still ongoing. The tale of Dos Santos isn't just about one man's rise and fall. It's a snapshot of a feverish crypto craze that gripped Brazil. With the economy on shaky ground and inflation running rampant, Bitcoin seemed like a lifeline for many Brazilians. But for every success story, there was a cautionary tale like Dos Santos's, reminding us that easy money often comes with a hefty price tag. Who are the people who can't help but commit crime over and over? Let's find out, starting with number 6, the hottest mugshots. Chelsea Timp, once hailed for having the hottest mugshot ever by the social media account Mugshotties, was back in the headlines after landing in legal trouble yet again. Mugshotties, if you're unaware, is a social media phenomenon where mugshots of attractive women who have been arrested are shared online. It started as a gimmick account on Twitter and Instagram, gaining popularity and followers by posting these mugshots along with the alleged crimes committed by the individuals. Anyway, Timp got herself arrested on suspicion of contempt of court, slander, and resisting a court order, much to the delight of her fans. But this isn't Timp's first mugshot experience. She initially made waves when the McCracken County Sheriff's Office in Kentucky nabbed her. That arrest led to a viral smirking mugshot and a slew of admirers. Her arrest wasn't a walk in the park either. She was part of a big bust that saw a whopping 14 people get rounded up. The charges were serious, such as trafficking and even second-degree manslaughter. Taylor Johnson is another girl who was dubbed insanely beautiful by mugshotties, and she found herself plastered all over Instagram as well after being arrested on suspicion of driving while under the influence and possessing, let's just call it the green stuff. The post grabbed thousands of likes and comments, with fans swooning over her beauty. Johnson herself chimed in, expressing disbelief that her mugshot resurfaced 2 years later without her consent. We'd like to think it's because she's embarrassed, but who knows? Number 5. A mugshot from Honduras. Heidi Ulloa, a member of the MS-13 gang, caused a stir online with her eye-catching mugshot after being busted for trafficking in Honduras. Is there a Mugshotties Honduras version? Ulloa was nabbed during a police operation in San Pedro Sula, where authorities seized a stash including 120 bags of that spicy powder, 20 bags of stuff you shouldn't step on or it'll break your mama's back, 6 bags of funky grass, 2 cell phones, and 900 lempiras, which is roughly $36. Okay, it was basically a whole bunch of illegal substances we won't name. Known as La Garra, or loose translation, The Claw, which is about as bad guy of a name as you can get. Ulloa was probably starting to get used to getting arrested. She had been busted twice for similar charges within 3 months back in 2022. While law enforcement hailed the operation as a win in the fight against illegal substance trafficking, social media users couldn't get enough of Ulloa's sultry mugshot, with some even offering to bail her out. In the midst of comments swooning over her looks, even a police officer shared his hope that Ulloa would turn her life around, emphasizing her beauty and lamenting her poor choices. Critics of Honduras' justice system question why Ulloa was released after previous arrests, contrasting the leniency with the tough approach taken by El Salvador's president Nayib Bukele in cracking down on gangs. It's weird that she's strongly associated with a gang that has a bad reputation, but people want to bail her out based on a mugshot. Human psychology is interesting. Number 4. The Serial Romancer. Emmanuel Scotts, a seasoned scammer, has been slapped with a hefty 12-year sentence for swindling over £320,000 from unsuspecting women he met on dating sites. Scotts, 55, wooed his targets online, persuading them to invest their savings, promising returns. But instead of making them rich, he funded his own lavish lifestyle with their hard-earned cash. After a rigorous trial, Scotts was convicted for 4 counts of fraud, cementing his status as a career con artist. He also copped to possession of fraudulent materials, including counterfeit credit cards, fake identification documents, and equipment used to create counterfeit cards. Acting Detective Chief Inspector David Vint didn't hold back, calling out Scotts for his heartless exploitation of innocent folks through romance scams. The City of London police didn't mince words either, vowing to hunt down fraudsters like Scotts and bring them to justice. The dedicated card and payment crime unit didn't let Scotts off the hook either. Their investigation revealed the depth of his crimes, tallying up his ill-gotten gains to a hefty £324,000. Detective Inspector Andrew Little, not one to sugarcoat things either, slammed Scotts for preying on his victims' emotion, leaving them shattered. He hoped the hefty sentence would help the victims rebuild their lives after falling victim to Scotts' deceitful games. Scotts' fraudulent activities weren't limited to romance scams. He and his wife, Benaz Coram Scotts, were involved in various other scams. Last year, both Scotts and Coram Scotts faced charges related to fraudulent activities, with Scotts admitting to conspiracy to commit fraud and Coram Scotts to possession of the fraudulent materials. Their schemes included opening fake bank accounts, depositing fraudulent checks, and running VAT scams. Scams where they evaded taxes or falsely claimed refunds on luxury brands like Chanel. Their lavish lifestyle, funded by all their scams, included high-end items like designer shoes and properties in exclusive areas. Despite claiming benefits, they lived above their means, even posing as wealthy tourists to claim tax refunds on items they hadn't purchased legitimately. It's bad enough that Scotts was romance scamming enough to get 12 years behind bars, but it's a little worse that he has a wife that was okay with it, isn't it? Number 3, the NYU finance director. Cindy Tapp, a former finance director at New York University, admitted to orchestrating a $3.5 million fraud scheme, diverting funds meant for minority and women-owned businesses to fuel her lavish lifestyle and home renovations in Connecticut. Tapp's activities were revealed when NYU's Internal Audit Office uncovered her scheme, leading to criminal charges. Tapp, while at the university's Metropolitan Metropolitan Center for Research on Equity and Transformation of Schools, allegedly funneled $3.3 million to two shell companies she created. This money, part of $23 million in state grants, should have supported educational programs but ended up financing TAP's personal expenses. The diverted funds, prosecutors claimed, were used not only for TAP's personal luxuries, including extensive renovations and an $80,000 pool at her Connecticut home, but also to cover NYU-related costs. TAP's legal woes extended beyond NYU. Despite landing a job as an operations manager at Yale's School of Medicine post-NYU, TAP was suspended after news of her indictment broke. Yale, emphasizing its thorough vetting process, put her on leave, distancing itself from the scandal. Prosecutors painted a vivid picture, a tapestry, if you will, of TAP's alleged financial mismanagement, accusing her of using state funding intended for educational programs to fund her extravagant lifestyle. TAP pleaded not guilty to these charges, initially maintaining her innocence despite mounting evidence. However, TAP did ultimately plead guilty to grand larceny, agreeing to 5 years probation and hefty restitution of $663,200. Despite her guilty plea, TAP expressed remorse through her lawyer, Deborah Colson, who said that TAP planned to fully repay the restitution before her sentencing. And that's the most sincere way to express remorse, right? Through your lawyer? What a bozo. Number 2. The Fake Trader. An Anchorage man, Garrett Elder, got himself in some deep trouble after swindling over 175 people out of $26 million in a 6-year investment scam. Elder pleaded guilty to wire fraud and ended up with a 10-year sentence in federal prison. Elder's sentencing got quite emotional as his victims poured out their stories, detailing how his actions wrecked their lives. Some lost their savings, while others were left with anxiety and depression from the financial strain. The court heard contrasting views of Elder. Was he a slick con man or just in over his head? Prosecutors painted him as a smooth operator who duped family and friends, while his defense argued he was in too deep and thought he could trade his way out of trouble. It all started innocently enough with a $20,000 investment from his parents, but things went south. Soon, Elder was cooking up fake performance reports to keep his investors fooled. By the time authorities caught on, he had blown through millions and was living it up with private jets and fancy vacations. Despite facing charges, Elder didn't stop his shenanigans. He kept roping in new investors until a CPA noticed something fishy and tipped off regulators. Even then, he continued his schemes until finally confessing to the FBI in 2022. At sentencing, victims vented their anger, feeling that the recommended sentence was too lenient. They wanted Elder to face the maximum penalty, given the havoc he wreaked on their lives. In the end, the judge threw the book at Elder, handing down a 10-year sentence, double what his defense requested. While some felt it wasn't enough, prosecutors were satisfied. 10 years is pretty brutal. Elder will have plenty of time to reflect on his actions as he begins his prison term, scheduled to self-surrender at a later date. Number 1. The serial Internet Romeo. Serial con artist David Checkley, dubbed an Internet Romeo, got himself sent back to prison after swindling £111,000 from 10 women. Checkley, 65, preyed on vulnerable individuals, posing as a wealthy man or a Vietnam War vet on the dating app Plenty of Fish. Previously incarcerated for a fake Rolex deal that resulted with someone passing away, he indulged in luxury vehicles like Mercedes and Harley Davidsons with his stolen money. His scam mirrored a 2010 con where he pretended to need money for a phony terminal illness cure, landing him a 6-year prison sentence. Between February of 2017 and February of 2021, Checkley manipulated women in their 50s, 60s, and 70s by telling stories of his impressive background, including being a U.S. fighter pilot and a successful architect. He specifically targeted those recently out of relationships, lonely, and yearning for companionship. Using emotional manipulation, he borrowed money from them under false pretenses, claiming urgent needs like house repairs or to buy discounted Rolex watches. Guy likes his watches, we guess. One victim, Lise Johansson, not only lost her savings, but was left homeless due to Checkley's lies. He even stole her mother's eternity ring while they were wrapping Christmas gifts. Which is like, what? We can at least make sense out of stealing and ripping people off. Obviously, we don't agree with it, but we can at least see the logic. tragic. But stealing some old woman's ring that's supposed to symbolize the love of someone she loved but has passed away? Sometimes there's just no words. Found guilty of 19 fraud charges and 1 theft charge, Checkley faced sentencing from a judge who condemned his heinous actions. In court, David Checkley demonstrated his lack of remorse by his demeanor and behavior. Despite being convicted of 19 counts of fraud and 1 count of theft, the guy showed no signs of regret or remorse. He remained totally indifferent to the suffering he caused his victims and continued to portray himself as a suave and charming individual. Checkley's arrest followed his return from a vacation to Ibiza in July of 2021, with evidence found during a search of his victim's residence. Authorities found invoices related to the purchase of expensive jewelry, a brochure for a large mansion in Hertfordshire, and a receipt for a £7,250 Rolex watch purchased in 2018. There was applause from some victims at his sentencing, and the detective in charge of the case, John Rock, commended the victims for their bravery. Do you think 6 years is enough to get Checkley to change his ways? Or do you think he'll be right back at it again the minute he's released? Who are some of the craziest serial criminals out there? Let's get straight to it, starting with number 5, Tony Tabin. Tony Tabin goes by many names and commits many crimes. Some people call him Don Solo, others simply call him Yi. A few others call him Mukisa Okello, and in some records, he's named Big Papa. But here's the thing about our man Tabin. No matter what name he was using, he was always up to some criminal mischief. According to police reports, he started his criminal lifestyle in Australia, where he was a wanted man. And his crime? Serial bank robbery. He made a life out of depositing stolen checks at banks to make a huge payday. And as his crimes were discovered, Tony Tabin didn't just wait around to get caught by the police. Instead, he snuck away to Uganda, where he hid for 2 years. And after those 2 years, he ran off to South Sudan, where he also committed a slew of crimes before finally returning to Uganda. In Uganda, Tabin started dating a pretty popular TV personality named Zahara Toto. She's sort of a Ugandan Wendy Williams. Toto thought, or at least she said she thought, that Tabin was from some wealthy Australian family, which we know isn't true. Apparently, he had given Toto a BMW as a gift, but it turned out that the car actually belonged to a South Sudanese tycoon living in Uganda. Just imagine the awkward conversation that must have went down when both Toto and the unnamed tycoon walked out into the parking lot and tried to unlock the same car. Awkward. It probably didn't happen like that, but we can dream. Anyway, Tabin has also committed several crimes in Kenya. He's wanted for depositing several bad checks and fraudulently purchasing 55-inch televisions. He's also wanted for spending nights in luxury hotels without paying. Sadly for Tony, he was eventually caught by the Nairobi police. He was taken to court and charged with forgery and illegal entry into Kenya. Maybe when he's thrown in jail, which most assuredly he will be, he can change his name again to Sally Jail Birdington, or something equally fancy. Number 4, champagne and Rolexes. Mansoor Kiani was pouring champagne on his Rolex one day, like you do, and cooling his heels in prison the next. Here's the thing about dear Mr. Kiani. He's a pharmacist, but not the sort of pharmacist who goes to school and works in a hospital. Instead, he's a street pharmacist who sells all manner of spicy and illegal, street medicine to people. Kiani made a lot of money from this business, which meant he had to hide his business from the police. His way of doing this was to use an encrypted phone communication system called EncroChat. But police eventually nailed EncroChat for allowing a bunch of shady things to happen, seized the servers, and were privy to the messages that Kiani was sending his underground business partners, among like a million other bad guys. Using the information from the servers of EncroChat, the police were able to track down Kiani and arrest him. And once he was arrested, they got videos and pictures of Kiani living a large life. And yes, they also saw videos of him washing his very expensive Rolex watch with very expensive champagne in a very very expensive club. But those days are now over, as he faced a very long sentence. And he's spending that sentence in a very cheap room, wearing very cheap clothes, and probably wearing no watch at all. And whatever he ended up covered in probably wasn't bling and champagne. Number 3. 58 identities. Carly Davidson lived like a royal by stealing the identities of at least 58 fellow Australians. Davidson would steal the personal information of her victims, such as their driver's licenses, dates of birth, and addresses, and then use that information to open accounts with buy now, pay later businesses. She would then use those accounts to shop and purchase expensive items for herself. Of course, she never paid those accounts back and left her victims to bear the burden of an awful credit rating. Once Davidson opened these accounts, she went on a $19,000 shopping extravaganza. She bought everything she ever wanted to buy. This includes injectable cosmetics, jewelry, IKEA furniture, which is like, okay, IKEA? She's being budget conscious with her stolen money? Maybe she just went in for those Swedish meatballs or those hot dogs and walked out with some furniture she has to build with those weird wrenches, like she's a handyman or something. Anyway, she also grabbed a 55-inch TV, shoes, Airbnb stays, and even rideshare services. She essentially stopped working and made stealing identities her full-time job. The scam was so complex that Davidson needed a ton of SIM cards just to run it. These cards were used to receive emails and verification texts using her victims' information. Since she didn't have access to their actual phones, Davidson just used her different SIM cards in her own phone instead. When police finally raided her home, they discovered just how extensive her scheme was. They found 96 SIM cards in a toolbox and also found 2 pieces of paper filled with credit card details and identity information. They also found evidence on a phone recovered from the house with texts where Davidson was impersonating her victims to complete setting up buy now, pay later accounts. So how did Davidson even put this scheme together? Well, according to the police, it all started when Davidson realized that she could mix and match the details of various victims to get lines of credit and purchase products without actually paying. And once she started doing it, she got really good at it really quickly. Her top 3 most unfortunate targets saw her use nearly $10,000 in credit. Davidson wasn't just a random credit scammer either. She also did a little illegal substance wheeling and dealing on the side. When the police raided her home, they found a safe containing 2 resealable bags with some very magical crystals. Davidson has since pleaded guilty to 70 charges, including dozens of counts of fraud, possessing stolen goods, and contraband possession. As of the release of this video, she's awaiting sentencing. Great. Now we've got a craving for those IKEA hot dogs and modern-looking shelves. Number 2. A needier scammer. Robert Riley Saunders stole thousands of dollars from the Ministry of Children and Family Development in Kelowna, British Columbia. In total, Saunders stole about $460,000 from the ministry, and it's possible he stole even more. But Saunders didn't steal all of this money at once. Instead, he instituted a systematic process that ensured that he could steal as much money from the ministry that was helping kids as he wanted without any alarm bells going off. The scam itself was ingeniously simple. Saunders would open a joint account in his name and the name of a kid who was entitled to money from the ministry. He would then cause checks to be issued payable to that youth to that joint account. Since Saunders had access to the joint account, he could easily withdraw the money from the account to his own account, which he had sole control over. Yeah, Saunders doesn't exactly sound like the best type of person. The clever part of this scam is that a vast majority of the checks were small affairs under $600. Since Saunders could issue these checks at least once a month per person, he had a never-ending gravy train of stolen child funds. Over 6.5 years, Saunders opened 24 such joint bank accounts and issued around 850 ministry checks that he eventually withdrew for himself. Saunders could have gotten away with it for as long as he wanted. There was no hole in the balance sheet, no one was reporting anything, and nothing looked off about Saunders. Unfortunately for him, his regular supervisor went on vacation and another person stepped in as his team lead, and then his fraud was uncovered and he was promptly arrested. Like most criminals, Saunders tried to share the blame for his behavior. First, he said that the 24 young people that he stole from weren't really entitled to the money. Therefore, the crime was basically victimless, said Saunders, which is obviously not true, since the money had to come from somewhere and was intended to go into an account that had nothing to do with Robert Saunders. Even if those kids weren't allegedly entitled to to that money some other kid was. And Saunders here only thought about himself. He used the money to purchase a nice house and nice cars and took expensive vacations when he could. He used to earn $4,000 per month when he started his scheme, but 2 years into it, he was earning roughly 12 grand a month. When his dumb excuse bombed like you knew it would, Saunders tried telling the judge that he regretted his actions and had even contemplated kicking the bucket in his own way, if you catch our drift. He also said he could no longer find work and his 2 adult children have essentially disassociated themselves from him. And the judge said, "Oh," and gave Saunders 5 years in prison, where it's probable someone will be rerouting his commissary to another cell. Hopefully he learns the lesson of not stealing from needy kids. Number 1. Don't worry, I'm famous. Mehdi Abalimba duped a former Love Island star by pretending to be a high-class soccer player when he was merely a non-league player who earned no more than £300 per month. But if you saw Abalimba, you would never believe that not only was he just a non-league player, he also worked as a taxi driver part-time. Abalimba, who once played for Derby County and once had an exciting future as a soccer star, couldn't quite make it in the big leagues due to injury problems. So, to supplement his income, Abalimba found a new position to play: fraudster. Abalimba started small. He began by breaking into lockers of the private health clubs he trained at and photographing the credit cards of wealthy patrons. He then posed as Chelsea football player Gael Kakuta and paraded himself around London, running up huge tabs which he either didn't pay, got someone else to pay, or paid with stolen credit cards. Taking no time at all, he had stolen close to £50,000. The authorities eventually caught up with him when he attempted to purchase £11,000 worth of clothes through the driver of a limo he'd no doubt got through illegal means. Abalimba eventually had his day in court and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. But even that wasn't enough to stop Abalimba from continuing a life of crime. In prison, he exploited a vulnerable 50-year-old nurse by getting into a relationship with her. The unnamed nurse even smuggled in a phone, and only God knows what he did with that phone. When Abalimba eventually got out of prison, he resumed his life of crime by targeting Love Island star Georgia Steele. He told Steele that he was an ex-U.S. serviceman and worked for a U.S. government agency, so he couldn't take pictures with her or own a social media account. He also told her that he didn't know her at all and had never heard of Love Island. He then said his name was Miguel Johnson. Unfortunately, Georgia believed all his lies, and they dated for 6 weeks. In fact, she introduced him to her family at her 21st birthday party. It wasn't until the paparazzi took pictures of her and Abalimba that her agent told her she was dating an ex-con fraudster. Sadly, Georgia didn't believe it until she found out he had spent £32,000 on her credit cards. So she confronted Abalimba, but he denied her accusations and stormed out of her home. And yet, Abalimba wasn't done. His next mark was the ex-wife of football star Thierry Henry, Claire Henry. While he was dating Claire, he was arrested for other crimes and put in the slammer for another 4 months. But something like a little jail sentence didn't disrupt Abalimba's scamming of Henry. He made sure to speak to her every day for 4 months and told her that he'd been sent on a military assignment to Kuwait. In any case, he eventually stole £50,000 from Claire. Thankfully, he didn't get away with it and has now been jailed for another 4 years. To learn more about how crazy this guy got with his scamming, and we only scratched the surface here, he got a little nuts with a limo. Who are a few of the worst criminals who just can't help but do crime over and over and over? Let's find out, starting with number 6, 5 years running. Remember Zahid Khan, that dude we covered before who thought he could escape the law when he fled the UK back in 2018? He had gone on the run after he was accused of running a license plate scam. A license plate scam involves fraudulently transferring the ownership of high-value personalized vehicle plates without the owner's consent. For example, plates with short combinations, single letters, or numbers like 1A or VIP can be particularly sought after and fetch high prices on the black market. Scammers use forged or stolen documents to change the registration details, then sell these personalized plates for large sums of money. They might even use these false plates on stolen cars to evade detection. Zahid was busted running one of these schemes. He was tried, found guilty, and was handed down a 10-year sentence, which it seems seems like Zahid wasn't exactly happy about. So instead of just sitting still and serving his sentence, Zahid decided to skip town to enjoy the sunshine of Dubai. That's certainly better than twiddling your thumbs for 10 years in a cold British jail, right? Unfortunately for Zahid, he could run, but he couldn't hide. In late 2023, with the help of Interpol, Turkish officials arrested him and sent him back to the UK to face his consequences. Before his journey to Dubai, Zahid had created an extraordinary criminal career for himself as the ringleader of a crew that stole the rights to the high-value personalized plates. Aside from this nasty plate theft business and some occasional car theft, Zahid also had a career in people trafficking. Zahid wasn't the type of dude to just tie himself down to only one criminal enterprise, you know? Hustler gonna hustle. Back in 2015, the police caught him transporting 5 Afghan nationals in a truck carrying a load of tires. So now he's finally back in the UK, and we just hope had enough sun during his trip to Dubai, because he won't be having much of that while he's locked up. It would be ironic if he had to make some license plates though, wouldn't it? Number 5, an inside job. Vera Moran made an extremely good living issuing authentic paperwork for stolen vehicles through a Miami tag agency, but she wasn't going to get away with it forever. The incredible thing is that Vera wasn't even the subject of the police's investigation that eventually got her caught. Her downfall began when police officers found a stolen car GPS was pinging inside a local auto shop. A search warrant was executed and the police found 3 stolen luxury vehicles in the shop, including a 2022 Lamborghini Urus, a 2023 Aston Martin DBS Superleggera, and a 2021 Mercedes-Benz G550. But wait, there's more! The police also found 2 fraudulent VIN plates which told them something even sneakier was going on at the shop. When the owner was questioned, he revealed that he had an insider at a Miami tag agency that authenticated his fraudulent papers and forged fraudulent tax and ownership papers for the vehicles. Vera pulled off scams by manipulating VINs associated with total loss vehicles and transferring them to the stolen cars. That way, they could be sold legally on the market without anyone suspecting a thing. The police explained that car thieves would steal cars from all over the state, change the VINs, then bring the stolen vehicle with fictitious paperwork to Miss Vera over at the agency. Vera would then register the car for use in Florida and get roughly $1,000 in return for her efforts. The money was usually sent to her through Cash App, Venmo, or other such apps. By the time the police caught up with Vera, she had registered about 18 vehicles, which means she had earned around $18,000. The police eventually recovered all 18 cars and found that at least 12 of them had been stolen. All 18 vehicles were also worth a combined value of almost $4 million. In the end, Miss Vera was arrested on 18 counts of title fraud and official misconduct and now has her bail set at $50,000. Too bad the proceeds of her crimes couldn't even cover her bail. Number 4. Theranos 2.0. Ilit Raz was on top of the world when her DEI HR startup, Junko, had raised $38 million in outside funds, and her position as CEO was stable. Junko, a company focused on DEI, which stands for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, was a tech startup founded with the aim of improving corporate diversity through its AI-powered job recruitment platform. The company, based in New York and Tel Aviv, claimed to connect companies with diverse job candidates by using advanced AI algorithms. And one day, Junko was on the brink of becoming a huge thing. Then the New York Post revealed that Raz had straight up lied to lure investors and raise funds. It turned out that her startup wasn't as valuable as investors thought, and everything was a sham. Junko was founded in 2016, and by 2019, the company already claimed that it had worked with big companies such as Adidas, PayPal, Nike, and Intuit. This claim obviously enticed investors who believed that the startup was worth something. Raz claimed that Junko was working with about 150 other companies, but the number was actually smaller. Like, way smaller. At most, there were maybe dozens of paying customers, and many of those high-profile clients mentioned that their materials were entirely fabricated. When these huge companies, such as Adidas, started distancing themselves from Junko, the New York Post reported on it, and that reporting led to a shutdown of the company's website. Raz also immediately resigned as CEO, and people started realizing that a lot of the company's numbers were fake. When Junko wanted to embark on a $25 million investment round with a venture capitalist, the press release had claimed that they worked with many huge companies that they hadn't actually worked with. They also claimed that they had experienced 500% growth in sales in 2 consecutive years, which is insane. But of course, the company couldn't provide details for their claimed earnings, which you would think they would be ready to show. There were also credible allegations that Raz created fake invoices, fake wire transfers, and even fake bank accounts to hide the actual numbers of her company. Some of you may be wondering how the venture capitalists that led their $25 million investment round let all of this happen, since they're supposed to be the business experts with all the money. Well, that venture capitalist was Insight Ventures, and they just happened to have seats on the company's board, meaning they were likely in on it as well. The company's board had been trying to get Raz to build an actual leadership team and hire a chief financial analyst. Of course, Raz ignored them because she knew what she was hiding. In any case, the company and its 50 employees have since closed down, and no one knows if it'll ever resume operations. And it probably won't, since the whole company was founded on lies anyway. At the time of this video, Elit Raz is facing down some pretty hefty legal consequences, having been charged with securities fraud and wire fraud by the SEC and DOJ. The charges claim that she allegedly defrauded investors out of over $21 million. You would think she would have learned not to do this after what happened with Elizabeth Holmes, right? It sounds like someone's working with a pretty low watt bulb. So for those reasons, we're out. Number 3, the golf thief. Prolific klepto Ivan Yurkiza has finally been arrested for grand theft and a load of other charges. He had been known to the police for at least 10 years, but he suddenly went off the radar in 2013 after he was arrested and charged with theft. Once he was charged, he ran, and the police weren't able to find him. He was gone for so long that the police may have even forgotten about him. Kind of like when you were playing hide and seek with your younger sibling and you happened to forget to keep looking for them, right? But then he appeared in some home security footage. The police were reminded they had been looking for him, and the game was over. Some guy's home security camera caught a random person throwing a bag into their trash can, which is like we've all thrown stuff in other people's trash cans on trash day, right? It's not super weird. But what was weird was that the bag was actually a pretty large backpack. So the homeowner decided to go see what it was. In the bag were a bunch of papers with contact info for the owner of the bag. So the homeowner reached out to them, and surprise, surprise, the bag belonged to a golfer that Ivan had stolen it from that day. The surveillance video allowed the police to track down Ivan through his car's plates. When police caught up to Ivan, he was in possession of a stolen firearm, some money, and an $18,000 Rolex. Additionally, there was evidence linking him to another theft at the same golf course just 1 month before his crime. This had apparently been Ivan's MO. He would sneak around golf courses and steal things, but his stealing days are now over. As of the release of this video, Ivan Urquiza is in police custody. He hasn't been sentenced yet, but he's facing multiple charges, including grand theft, so it's not looking good. Authorities are continuing their investigation and have linked him to similar offenses in multiple states. Number 2, weekend hobbies. Lois Loader dined and dashed several times at restaurants in Perth, Australia, but somehow convinced herself that she was actually the victim in all of this, and even tried to raise money for her legal defense through GoFundMe. Lois's headaches began when one of the restaurants she had dined and dashed at with her male partner released pictures of her on their Facebook page. They asked if people knew who she was and noted that she had just had an excellent lunch at their expense because she refused to pay. What Lois didn't know was, at the time, that one revelation by one of her victims would lead to other allegations by other restaurants she had fleeced over the years. The police claimed that they had evidence of other crimes Lois committed, including not paying for her gas at a gas station, using a stolen credit card to buy alcohol and book a hotel room, and driving a car with stolen plates. The police noted that she has over 22 similar charges before the court and could receive a summons for a further 46 more charges. Taraza Applecross cafe, who were sick of Lois stealing from them, claimed that she and her partner racked up a $200 bill and left before paying. So they posted pictures of the couple on Facebook. But rather than just settling her bill, Lois used her clever alias she made up, Lois Lynn, to give a 1-star nasty review to the cafe. So nervy Lois didn't pay, and then had the gall to say the restaurant was awful and that you would see hair from someone's privates in their butter. With an alias that clever, it's shocking she was found out, right? What a moron. And did our amazing Lois Loader stop there? No, she didn't. Another restaurant posted a picture of Lois and her male accomplice also enjoying a meal, complete with a $48 wine they never paid for, and asked the public if they knew them. According to that restaurant, Lois and her partner had racked up a $250 bill, and throughout their stay, they went in and out of the restaurants for cigs. That way, the staff didn't notice when they went out for the last time and took their belongings with them. When another restaurant complained about Lois's dining and dashing habits, she texted them and told them to keep their mouths shut, or she would give them so many bad reviews it would make their head spin. Another restaurant was fleeced to the tune of $250 on 2 different occasions. Yet another restaurant claimed that Lois and her partner had racked up $240 in unpaid bills, and according to the cops, Lois has done the same thing to at least 12 other businesses. When Lois's gig was up, she decided to run one last con by opening a GoFundMe and claiming that she was a victim of a witch hunt. Well, she would be correct if witch hunt meant actually catching worthy criminals and putting them behind bars, or if she was an actual witch and was being hunted. Her plan didn't quite pan out, as people left comments telling her to either pay the debt she owed or face the music. So she decided to face the music, as Lois has pleaded guilty to 8 new charges. It appears Lois will be spending more time dining in jail in the future. The good thing is she won't have to pay, but if she tries to dash, she's going to get in way more trouble. Seriously, what kind of cojones did Lois have to actually start a GoFundMe over this? Is she really so delusional that she thought she could really get people to be on her side? And yeah, it's not the worst crime anyone has committed, but if you have ever worked in a restaurant and had this happen, you know exactly how aggravating it is. Hats off to the restaurants who exposed her. Number 1, her own brother. Annabelle Allen, a mother of 2 who worked as an IT specialist for a Lloyds Bank branch in the UK, conned a bunch of people, including her own family members, into investing in a fake share scheme that gulped roughly £500,000. Her brother was so enraged at her con, because she conned him too, that he even supported efforts to put her behind bars. Obviously, Annabelle clearly had a lot of things going on with her. She professionally described herself as a hard-working, bubbly, enthusiastic, and friendly person who has a thirst for knowledge. But apparently, Annabelle didn't just have a thirst for knowledge. She also had a near insatiable thirst for money. And unfortunately for her, her thirst for knowledge and money got her 4 years in prison. Annabelle began her crimes back in 2017 when she started struggling with a lot of debt. Around that period, she was working as part of the IT staff of a bank and convinced her friends and family to invest in a fake share scheme. A share scheme is a plan allowing investment in company shares, usually organized by a particular company, to allow employees to buy shares directly from that company, often with some added benefits such as discounted prices. We know it has the word scheme in it, which raises antennas, but it's basically just stock options and not inherently bad. However, a fake share scheme tricks people into paying money for non-existent shares. Annabelle didn't just lie to everyone about shares that didn't exist either. She actually forged letters from the police and solicitors to prove that her share scheme actually existed. One of the victims was so convinced that she gave Annabelle her entire life savings, and when she was confronted about it, Annabelle only had crocodile tears to offer her. When the bank discovered her crimes, she was promptly dismissed and fired. Then they reimbursed some of her clients. The key word being some, right? Well, at least it's something. Anyway, Annabelle paid out around £300,000 back to her investors, Ponzi style, but still ultimately fleeced everyone out of about £160,000. After leaving the bank, Annabelle was still up to her old tricks. She used her position at a car sales company to defraud 3 more unsuspecting customers of nearly £40,000. She also helped her brother rack up over £16,000 in debt by taking out some loans in his name without his knowledge. According to her lawyer, Annabelle was just doing all of this fraud to pay off her debts she started acquiring at 18. With her own brother having supported the prosecution, Annabelle earned herself 4 years in prison. Sounds like Annabelle went from being a con artist to just being a con. Boom! Who are a few of the worst criminals with a heart for crime? Let's find out, starting with number 5, targeted robbery. Patricia McKay, a 68-year-old tourist from New Zealand, met a tragic end during a robbery outside an upscale shopping mall in Newport Beach, California. Her husband sadly had to watch the whole thing happen as the couple was targeted by 3 men. These men were later identified as Leroy McCrary, 26, from Compton, and 2 18-year-olds, Malachi Darnell from Los Angeles and Jaden Cunningham from Lancaster. The 3 have since been charged. The McKays were walking outside a Barnes & Noble at Fashion Island Mall when they were suddenly approached by Darnell and Cunningham. Wearing masks, the 2 demanded valuables from the couple, including Mr. McKay's watch. When the men couldn't get the watch because McKay was resisting, they turned their attention to Patricia McKay, who was holding several shopping bags. In the struggle, the robbers dragged Patricia into the parking lot where McCrary, the driver of the getaway car, waited. As Mr. McKay tried to protect his wife, McCrary accelerated the vehicle, striking and running over Patricia, who was then dragged beneath the car for several feet. This brutal act ended her life, leaving Mr. McKay and onlookers in shock. And despite the terrors of the scene, the suspects still didn't end their destructiveness. As they fled, Darnell discharged a weapon at a Good Samaritan who had attempted to intervene. Fortunately, no one was struck by the rounds. The police quickly initiated a high-speed chase that led them across county lines, with the suspect's vehicle reaching speeds of 110 miles per hour. During the high-speed chase, 2 of the suspects, Darnell and Cunningham, jumped out of the car and tried to flee on foot. McCrary, the driver, continued driving but was later found hiding behind trash cans after he abandoned the car, completely exhausted after trying to escape on foot. Of course, all 3 men were caught. Following their arrest, the suspects refused to appear in court, even when ordered by the judge. Their defiance led to video appearances via iPads brought to their cells where none of them spoke. Of course, their refusal to face justice only made people more upset, especially given that McCrary had a pretty robust criminal record. His history included convictions for robbery, burglary, and making criminal threats. Yet, he was free on probation due to a lenient plea deal. The crime sparked widespread anger for obvious reasons, with Newport Beach's mayor, Will O'Neill, condemning the actions of the suspects and criticizing the judicial system that allowed McCrary to remain free. As of the release of this video, the 3 men involved in the tragic passing of Patricia McKay remain in jail and have yet to enter a plea. However, they have been charged and could potentially face the ultimate penalty. We hope that justice does get served and the family gets some measure of peace. We can't imagine what that was like watching something like that happen to a loved one. Please remember that your stuff isn't worth your life. It's just stuff, and people can replace stuff, but they can never replace you. Number 4, a disturbed mind. 29-year-old Turigwa Inaru from Orlando, Florida, jumped into the deep end of the crazy pool without her floaties. Inaru, who was already in jail for threatening to end the lives of her former co-workers at Disney, allegedly took her malicious intentions even further by plotting to have her own parents and grandparents taken out, as well as the state attorney prosecuting her. According to law enforcement, Inaru tried to recruit fellow inmates to carry out the plot, motivated by a $2 million inheritance she claimed she would receive upon her relative's passing. She allegedly offered $50,000 per victim to anyone willing to go through with the plan. The scheme was as twisted as it was horrifying, with Inaru actually providing detailed instructions on how to make the crimes appear as a robbery gone wrong. In addition to targeting her own family, Inaru allegedly also targeted Assistant State Attorney Peter Francis Donnelly, who was prosecuting her case. She apparently wanted to see him suffer, even saying that she didn't care if his family was also targeted. Inaru was so consumed by rage that she said she'd carry out the crimes herself if no one else would. However, her cellmates, rather than accepting her offer, chose to alert a corrections officer instead, because all of this is a lot, even for prison. This led to the sheriff's office sending an undercover detective, posing as an inmate, into Inaru's cell. Despite her initial denials, Inaru later admitted to investigators that she had indeed been plotting to have her family bumped off. She also accused her parents of some inappropriate behavior with her and her siblings during their childhood, although another family member refuted this by suggesting that Inaru really needed some mental help. As a result of the plot allegations, Inaru was charged with some new crimes. During her initial court appearance, she displayed a chilling lack of remorse, actually smirking for whatever reason as she responded to the judge. As of the release of this video, Inaru remains in jail without bond, clearly a disturbed individual facing serious legal consequences. However, why smirk at the judge though? What a weird thing to do. It's as if she wanted to show how cold and uncaring she was, but wanted to show that she was still friendly? Regardless, it's pretty clear she's not mentally all there. Number 3. Unsuspecting clients. Prince Aduro, a 34-year-old from Westerville, Ohio, was sentenced 8.5 years in prison for wire fraud and money laundering. Oduro, a former employee at JP Morgan Chase, exploited his position at the bank to orchestrate a series of fraudulent schemes that targeted the bank's customers. Starting in 2015, Oduro stole personal information from several Chase customers and used it to create unauthorized PayPal accounts, transferring stolen funds into these accounts before withdrawing the money for himself. And the thing was, Ojuro's criminal activities extended beyond his work at the bank. Because why only scam people where he works, right? So Ojuro was involved in elaborate online romance scams, convincing victims to send him large sums of money by pretending to be someone in desperate need, such as an American soldier injured overseas or someone with access to a fortune in gold or silver. By March of 2020, Ojuro had laundered over $1 million from these scams. Despite being arrested in February of 2022 and pleading guilty in January of 2023, Ojuro continued his fraudulent activities while out on bond. One of his more notable schemes involved convincing a widow that her late husband had hidden valuable artwork in Atlanta. She believed the story too, since her late husband had traveled frequently, so she ended up transferring $390,000 to bank accounts under Ojuro's control, hoping to retrieve her husband's supposed assets. In total, Ojuro's schemes caused nearly $2 million in losses. His actions have led to a court-ordered restitution of approximately $1.8 million. Ojuro's crimes were meticulously planned and executed over several years, starting with small-scale thefts at his workplace and escalating to large-scale online fraud. His ability to blend his bank job with illegal activities enabled him to exploit victims across multiple states. One of the more disturbing aspects of Ojuro's criminal activities was his persistence. Even after being caught and pleading guilty, he just couldn't resist the urge to continue his scams. This relentless pursuit of easy money showed a deep-seated greed and lack of remorse. After his initial arrest, he conducted another romance scam, leading to an additional $709,500 in losses. His repeated offenses after his arrest highlight not just his greed, but also his willingness to manipulate and deceive vulnerable individuals without a second thought. To make matters just a little worse, a search of Ojuro's phone revealed WhatsApp messages where he straight up brags about his illegal activities. He said his schemes were the only business in America where he can make $20,000 a month without getting caught. Of course, he was doing this bragging before he was arrested, so now it's kind of funny. But this attitude, coupled with the scale of his operations, paints a picture of a guy who truly saw crime not just as a means to an end, but as a legitimate career path. The consequences of Ojuro's actions have never been severe. As of the release of this video, he's doing 8.5 in federal prison and must pay back nearly $2 million to his victims, which he'll probably never do. Number 2. The Pretend Nurse. Bridget Cleroux, a 52-year-old woman from Canada, became notorious for her decades-long criminal career impersonating various professionals, Frank Abagnale style. She was sentenced to 7 years in prison after posing as a nurse at multiple medical facilities in Ottawa and Vancouver. Her fraudulent actions affected nearly 1,000 patients, many of whom were unaware that they were being treated by someone with no medical qualifications. Cleroux's scheme began to unravel when a nurse at an Ottawa clinic became suspicious of her unprofessional unprofessional behavior. Using the alias Melanie Smith, someone who was an actual RN, Cleroux intimidated patients and colleagues, raising enough concern for a fellow nurse to investigate her background. It didn't take long to discover that Cleroux wasn't registered to practice nursing in Ontario, and in fact, wasn't a nurse at all. Further research revealed her true identity and a lengthy criminal record that spanned over 3 decades across North America. Realizing who she was dealing with, the nurse immediately contacted the authorities, leading to Cleroux's arrest. Her actions weren't isolated incidents either. She had a history of impersonating professionals in various fields, including education and healthcare, in several provinces and U.S. states. Her criminal record includes at least 67 convictions for crimes ranging from forgery to impersonation. Cleroux managed to secure employment at BC Women's Hospital in Vancouver and Victoria's View Royal Surgical Medical Center by using a fabricated resume that included the credentials and registration number of a real nurse named Melanie Smith. Her deception was so thorough that she manipulated the hiring process, providing false references from email addresses she controlled. Described as having an intimidating presence, which is an attitude you'd want from your nurse, right? Cleroux administered heavy-duty controlled medications to unsuspecting patients. Despite numerous complaints about her lack of professionalism, she continued to work until her true identity was uncovered in June of 2021, leading to her termination and subsequent arrest. Cleroux's criminal activities were fueled by her clear desire for attention and admiration, often manifesting in a grandiose style. Her fraudulent actions left a trail of victims, including the real nurse Melanie Smith, who was forced to change her last name to distance herself from Cleroux's actions. Patients, some of whom received treatment during the critical medical procedures, were left with lasting distrust in the healthcare system. Fortunately, Bridget Cleroux's life of crime finally caught up with her, but the damage she inflicted on her victims' lives is far from over. As of the release of this video, Bridget Cleroux is facing a total of 32 charges that span several jurisdictions, reflecting her extensive history of fraudulence and deception. Investigations are outgoing, and it's possible that more charges could be added as further victims come forward. It's weird to think that Cleroux was busted because she had such a bad attitude and was acting unprofessionally, right? You'd think that if she was trying to convince everyone else she was a nurse, she'd try being a little more low-key and likable, not developing a reputation for being intimidating. But we suppose if her brain was working right, she wouldn't be pulling this stuff in the first place. Number 1. Crime Wave. Molly L. Dutroux, known for her inability to not do crimes, was arrested after leading police on a dangerous high-speed chase in a stolen vehicle filled with illegal substances. But this was just the latest incident to add to her already extensive history of criminal activity, including multiple charges of identity theft and fraud over the years. While working as a food server at a local restaurant, Dutroux stole credit card numbers from customers and used them for personal purchases, with one victim reporting over $600 in unauthorized charges. This initial crime was followed by another theft at a shipping and packaging company, where Dutroux again stole a customer's credit card information and racked up another $650 in fraudulent purchases. Dutroux, who was 21 at the time, was eventually caught and pleaded guilty to second-degree identity theft, which is a felony. Her repeated offenses led the court to revoke her bail, and she was sent to county jail, where she clearly didn't learn her lesson. Molly Dutroux's criminal history took another turn when at 24, she refused to pay a $10 parking fee at the Oyster Bay Oyster Festival. Her refusal somehow escalated into a physical confrontation when she knocked down a parking attendant with her vehicle, causing minor injuries. When police attempted to arrest her, Dutroux resisted and even bit an officer, bruising his hand. Further investigation revealed Dutroux was driving on a suspended license and had the devil's lettuce in her possession. Her criminal record at that point included the previous arrests for identity theft, as well as theft of groceries worth over $1,000 and fraudulently obtaining a paycheck by impersonating a store employee. In this case, Dutroux faced a long list of charges, including resisting arrest, identity theft, and multiple counts of larceny, and her bail was set at $50,000. Years later, Molly Dutroux, now 29, wound up in even deeper trouble on Long Island. After stealing a 2020 Mazda CX-5, Dutroux led police on a dangerous chase through local streets after a license plate reader identified it as a stolen vehicle. Dutroux, behind the wheel, refused to stop, instead driving recklessly and even steering into oncoming traffic. In a particularly dangerous moment, Dutroux accelerated towards an officer, forcing him to discharge his firearm, which struck the car but caused no injuries. The chase ended with Dutroux's arrest, and a search of the vehicle revealed a significant quantity of illegal illegal substances and paraphernalia, surprising no one. Dutroux was charged with unauthorized use of a vehicle and fleeing from law enforcement, while her passenger, Randall Hutchinson, also faced multiple possession charges. Dutroux's arrest added to her already extensive criminal record, and she was held without bail pending her trial. Given her history of repeated offenses and the serious nature of the new charges, she's expected to face a lengthy prison sentence. The exact details of her sentencing are still pending as her case continues through the legal system as of the release of this video. And hopefully, she actually does some time, because it doesn't sound like this girl is going to be keeping out of trouble for very long if she's let out. Who are the most despicable criminals around? Let's find out, starting with number 7, the Beauty Queen's plot. Lindsay Shiver tried to take her husband out by sending his picture to a Bahamas button man and telling that button man to take him out. Her husband, ex-football player Robert Shiver, had already filed for divorce by the time the police uncovered the plot. The Shivers had met way back in 2007 in college when Robert was still captain of the football team. They married a few years later, and that marriage produced 3 kids. However, things soon went sideways when Lindsay met another man named Terrence Bethel while she was vacationing in the Bahamas. The two ended up having an affair, which Robert found out about. So, he filed for divorce and cut off Lindsay's access to his family's luxurious mansion and private jet. In response, Lindsay hit Robert with a counter-filing where she claimed that she had suffered and that any extramarital relationship she had come after they were separated. It was a serious domestic issue that could have remained just that. But everything changed after a break-in at a bar in the Bahamas where Bethel worked. During the investigation of the break-in, police asked the staff to hand over their phones, and Bethel's phone revealed messages related to the plot. The police found WhatsApp messages where Lindsay, Bethel, and another guy named Newbold discussed ending Robert's life. The trio were arrested, and even more incriminating messages were found on their phones, one of which included the picture of Robert Lindsay had sent to Newbold and a message asking him to take Robert out. All 3 of them have since been arrested, and while Bethel and Newbold were somehow able to get released on bond, Lindsay is still in prison. She'll have to cough up at least $100,000 to secure bail, and will have to prove that she has somewhere to stay in the Bahamas pending her release. As of the release of this video, this case is ongoing. Number 6, the nurse impersonator. Herman Brightman posed as a nurse online to attract women, who he then kidnapped. But his deception was only the beginning of a much darker plan. Brightman would create fake profiles on Facebook and Hinge and say that he was a nurse. Of course, he didn't use his real name, instead going by Nazir Griffiths or Nazir Luckett, which were unusual choices for a fake name since they tend to stand out. Anyway, Brightman would claim that he was a nurse working at NYC-based hospitals, and then post pictures of himself wearing scrubs or lab coats. He even went as far as creating fake ID cards, because this dude was a dedicated liar. He also created a fake LinkedIn page which said that he worked at a cancer center. So, why all the deception? Brightman would use his fake identities to attract women to date them, but when they tried to end the relationship, he would quickly become terrifying. Sometimes he would go as far as kidnapping them, threatening their lives. In one case, Brightman went to New York and forced a woman and her child to follow him back home after she had ended their relationship. Thankfully, the woman was able to escape the next day. A year after that, he went after another woman he had been dating and aggressively threatened her with a knife. A month after that, he lured yet another woman into his car, forced her to call another woman he had been stalking, and then went after her as she tried to escape. Later that month, he went to the home of yet another woman who had dumped him, and he went after her. Thankfully, Brightman has since been arrested and was hit with 8 federal charges, including kidnapping, interstate stalking, and cyber stalking. Each kidnapping count carries a minimum sentence of 20 years, so Brightman has a not-so-bright future ahead of him. As of the release of this video, Brightman is in custody, awaiting trial. Number 5. The Toxic Smoothie. Former school teacher Sarah Sheffer somehow had the bright idea that the best way to end her relationship was to poison her husband with a plant called a lily of the valley. Apparently, just leaving him would have been too easy, we guess. Fortunately, her husband figured out his wife's plot and actually caught her in the act through a hidden camera. Mr. Sheffer had been sick for weeks when he noticed that a beverage his wife often gave him to deal with his illness made him feel even worse. Anytime he got the drink, he said he felt extreme fatigue, confusion, and even blurred vision. One day, he confronted his wife about the oddly bitter taste of the drink, and of course, she started lying her butt off. Sarah first said that she had peed in it, which was super weird, but not life-threatening. And then she said that she had put an industrial-strength adhesive in it as well, which is way worse, but also not life-threatening. Luckily, Mr. Sheffer didn't just accept these bizarre confessions. If Sarah could admit to all of that, who says she couldn't be doing something worse? So, he got a hidden camera and placed it in front of the kitchen to see what was really going on. The camera captured Sarah blending the contents of a green bowl, which were gotten from roots from a bag labeled Lily of the Valley. Lily of the Valley is a popular flower for weddings, is used in perfumes, and has been used in old herbal remedies. However, it's toxic to humans when too much is ingested, especially its roots. Upon this discovery, Mr. Sheffer told the police, and his wife was promptly arrested. Investigations proved that Sarah knew exactly what she was doing and was fully aware that the plant was toxic and had planned to off her husband. So why would she plan something so horrific? As it turned out, Sarah had gotten into a relationship with a man in Pakistan and wanted to bump off her husband and then flee to the country to be with him. As of the release of this video, Sarah Sheffer has been charged and remains in custody. She's being held without bond, and the court considers her a flight risk due to her alleged relationship with the Pakistan guy and searches for flights there. Seriously, why poison this guy? She could have just left and everyone would have been better off. Number 4. Scammed and scarred. Cancer survivor and warrior Emma Mann has gone through a lot in her life, and now she has to face even more troubles as she's been scammed out of her last $5,000. Emma's health problems were a result of Gorlin syndrome, a rare hereditary disorder that predisposes her to skin and brain cancer. Emma had been diagnosed with multiple brain tumors before the age of 2, so she was already having a pretty rough go of things, and at the time of the scam call, she was dealing with skin cancer. Emma's nightmare began when she received a scam call from people who said they wanted to help her as she was a victim of fraud. The call said that her card had been used for a $400 purchase on Amazon, and that to fix it, she needed to buy gift cards and send the codes. So Emma complied, and the callers made her use all of her money to buy up gift cards, and even told her to go get a $3,000 cash advance from the bank to get even more cards. In total, she bought around $5,000 worth of gift cards. This scam might seem obvious to most, but Emma's condition, rather than a lack of intelligence, predisposed her to being overly trusting and susceptible to manipulation. So Emma provided the scammers with the activation codes on the cards, and that was the last she had ever heard from them. By the time Emma realized what had happened, she only had $79 in her bank account. She called the police, her bank, and anyone who could listen to get her money back. But like usual, she couldn't. Heart-wrenching cases like this are a major reason why we make these videos. The only way to combat scams is by being aware of them. And the more people that aren't fooled, the more we share what we know, and the more we watch out for one another, the better the world will be. Number 3, the money doctor and his mistress. The mistress of a host of a Christian radio show has now been sentenced to life in prison for running a Ponzi scheme that sucked $31 million from over 200 retirees in 3 years. The radio show host, William Doc Gallagher, and his mistress, Deborah May Carter, conspired to rip off senior citizens of their life savings and showed no remorse for doing so. Their operation was fairly simple. Gallagher attracted the victims through his radio show, and Carter was tasked with making sure the victims never got their money back. The sweet-talking radio host told victims that they were investing in a scheme that would give them retirement money they couldn't outlive. That was, of course, a complete lie. The most surprising thing about this case, at least to us, was that Deborah Carter was the mastermind behind the entire gig, not Gallagher. She was also the one tasked with laundering the money, and she did so through fake charities, rental homes, and land. By the time the law finally caught up with the duo, Carter had stored $200,000 worth of gold and silver in her trailer. The police discovered this stash of wealth after raiding her home. Gallagher was soon arrested after this, and he confessed to receiving almost $30 million from 60 investors over 5 years. In total, the duo had scammed over 200 people of $31 million. Following a 2-week trial where Carter represented herself, she was sentenced to life in prison. Carter, who was 65 at the time of her arrest, will likely end up spending the rest of her life in prison. Sucks for her, but she should have thought of that before defrauding vulnerable people of their hard-earned retirement money. Number 2, sedation for silence. One easy way to have an easy shift as a nurse is to just sedate your patients. At least that's what Katherine Hudson thought when she dosed a couple patients just so that she would get some peace and quiet during her shift. The 57-year-old nurse didn't feel an ounce of remorse either, even texting other nurses about her sedation escapades while on duty. In one text, Hudson bragged she sedated one patient to within an inch of her life and expected her to be flat for weeks. She then threatened another patient and said if he started any ruckus, he would get sedated back into the Stone Age. Hudson wasn't alone in her malpractice either. She had another nurse, Charlotte Wilmot, who she texted regularly about sedating patients. The pair probably would have continued to get away with it too if some pesky student nurse hadn't noticed some weird things going on with the pair as they administered the medicine to patients. The whistleblowing student nurse said that she noticed the use of Zopiclone, an insomnia medicine, on a patient. Hudson then told the nurse that the patient had a do not resuscitate order, which meant no one would investigate anything if she came to harm. So obviously this freaked her out. So the student nurse reported all of this to the hospital's senior managers, who launched an investigation and found the text messages between Hudson and Wilmot talking about their crimes. They must have thought it wasn't a big deal since they were so chatty about it. But as it turns out, medical malpractice is actually a pretty big deal, and Hudson was sentenced to 7 years and 2 months in prison. Wilmot, on the other hand, bagged a 3-year sentence in jail. It's always disheartening to hear about things like this happening in hospitals. You don't want to do your job or you're burned out, just quit. Don't take your frustrations out on the people you're supposed to be caring for. Number 1, the doctor's secret. Dr. Eric Sills violated the Hippocratic Oath and several other state laws when he ended his wife's life and then claimed that she had fallen down the stairs. On the morning of the supposed accident, Sills made a frantic call to 911 and claimed that he had just woken up and his wife was deceased at the bottom of the stairs. He probably thought he was going to get away with his crime without issue, but he was wrong. Apparently, Sills had made a few critical mistakes with his crime. First, there were signs of a struggle in the home as officers found patches of his wife's, Suzanne's, hair in another room. They also found evidence of a struggle on the walls and curtain of their children's room, which was where Suzanne had been sleeping. Further autopsy results showed that Suzanne's injuries that had supposedly ended her life didn't come from falling down the stairs. But why would this respected doctor even think of ending his wife's life, someone that he had 2 beautiful kids with? As it turns out, it has a bit to do with bets, politics, and Donald Trump. This crime happened way back in 2016 after Donald Trump became president. For some reason, Suzanne had placed a bet in a private group chat saying she would post a topless picture if Trump won. As we know, Trump shockingly won that election. And Suzanne wasn't the type to back out on a bet, so she did the deed and posted the picture. The discovery of the photo apparently triggered her husband in a pretty significant way. Prosecutors found evidence that Sills and his wife had gotten into a series of very serious fights about the bet, which put even more strain on their already crumbling relationship. The crazy thing about this case is that it took 3 years for police to collect and analyze enough DNA evidence to arrest Sills for his crime. 5 years later, Sills was found guilty by a jury and received 15 years to life. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comments section, what superpower would you rather have? The ability to speak with and understand any animal, or the ability to instantly, fluently speak, read, and write every human language that has ever existed?